Okay, tests, contests, and challenges. Okay, I was looking for this because I wanted the definition of a test, contest, and challenge to be laid out more clearly because it's not clear to me yet. So a test is when you roll dice to resolve a situation by determining if there's a successful outcome or a challenging failure. Examples might include climbing a wall, escaping a guard, or solving a riddle. Almost always, tests are initiated by a narrator asking the player, "What do you do?" When your PC gets into a conflict over something they want, this is called a contest, which determines if another character can intervene, thwart, or oppose your character. Examples include fighting a duel with a foe, arm wrestling a friend, or baking the best pie. Contests are almost always initiated by a player who picks up the dice and essentially says, "I'm doing this, who's stopping me?" Okay, so tests, that's almost like passive, and then contests are active. Okay, now, what is a challenge? Something in between tests and contests are a challenge. Okay. This is when the narrator describes the situation that might take more than a single test to resolve, even one that is time-sensitive or carries an ongoing risk. Examples include fighting back an army, disarming a complex magical trap, or convincing a room full of nobles to do things your way. Challenges start with questions like, "Can I do this before time runs out?" Or "How long is this going to take?" Okay, so I got the distinction between test and contest. Passive and active. Something a bit different here with challenge. A player can always choose not to respond to a test or challenge and find another way forward. The narrator or other player can always respond to a contest by declaring that they don't oppose the initiating player, in which case the character simply gets what they wanted. In all cases, there's usually no need for an effect die. If one is needed, use the largest die in the pool. Plot points. The plot points give a player a measure of control over their character's fate. They represent luck and fortune, but also narrative authority. They're how we separate important characters in the story from those who aren't as critical. With plot points, both the player and the narrator can tweak the results of the die, activate special effects to do interesting things, and place a hand on the scales for a moment when the dice are fickle. Every player gets a plot point at the beginning of each session. Unspent plot points roll over to the next session, but even if you end a session without any, you always start the next session with one. Kind of like fate points. Earning plot points as a player. There are several ways for players to earn plot points during play. If you earn a plot point because of a die roll, such as a hitch, you can't use that plot point until your die roll is resolved, so you can't roll a 1, get a plot point, and then spend it to add more dice to your total. Okay, hitches. The narrator may hand a plot point over to you to activate one or more of your hitches. They can step up a stress die on your character, they can create a d6 temporary asset for one of their NPCs involved in the scene, or they can step up a die in a challenge pool, if there is one. If you rolled multiple hitches, the narrator can step up the stress, asset, or challenge die by one more step for each additional hitch you rolled, maximum d12, without giving you an additional plot point. If the narrator wants to do different things with each hitch you rolled, they need to give you a separate plot point for each one. Otherwise, you only get one plot point, even if they use all the hitches to step up your stress dice. Giving in. If you give in during a contest and let your opponent succeed rather than rolling the dice to beat their total, you earn a plot point. You only get this plot point if you've already rolled at least once in the contest. You don't get a plot point if someone starts a contest and you choose not to oppose it. Okay, special effects. Some special effects, including the default hinder special effect for all distinctions, gives you a plot point. Role-playing. The narrator is always free to hand out plot points for remarkable moments in play, including making everyone laugh, doing something truly heroic and in character regardless of your distinctions, and so forth. This should be limited to one plot point for each such occasion. Spending plot points as a player. Okay, what do? You can spend them on several things. You can activate a special effect. Okay, some of the special effects require one of these. Only last for the duration of the roll it's on. Okay, create a temporary asset. You can create a temporary asset by spending a plot point. This asset has a d6 rating, and you must give it a name like Tree Branch or Higher Ground. You can assign it to yourself or to somebody else. It's an advantageous bonus for a test, contest, or challenge that lasts for as long as the test, contest, or challenge lasts. You may include it in your dice pool just like you would any other asset. If you spend an extra plot point, the asset lasts for the rest of the session. Include more results. After any roll, you may spend a plot point to include more results in your total out of those you just rolled. This way, your total may be 3, 4, or 5 dice added together. The only limit to how many results you may add to your total is how many dice you rolled to begin with and how many plot points you have available. Remember, you can't add any hitches to your total. Keep an extra effect die. Sometimes you want to be able to achieve multiple outcomes with a single test or contest. In that case, you need more than one effect die. You can spend a plot point to choose another of your remaining dice as an effect in addition to the first. You can't do this if you don't have any dice left over from your roll, or if the other dice left over are hitches. These extra effect dice can't all be used the same way. If you're giving a foe exhausted stress with one effect die, you must use a different sort of stress or create an asset with the other effect die. Share an asset. If you've created a temporary asset, or you have an asset of your own that you would like to share with other characters, you can spend a plot point to make this asset open, allowing other characters in the scene to use it in their dice pools. This lasts for as long as the temporary asset lasts, or until the end of a scene if it's one of your character assets. Activating opportunities. When the narrator rolls an opportunity, which is the same as the player rolling a hitch, you spend a plot point to activate it if the roll is opposing you, if it's being rolled in opposition to you on a test, contest, or challenge. When you do this, the narrator assigns it to their personal plot point supply that's used for all narrator characters. You can do one of two things. You can step down one of your stress dice, or you can step up an existing asset, even one of your character assets, until the asset goes away or the scene ends, whichever comes first. Some special effects might activate on opportunities as well. You know, with all of the ratings as dice and also stepping up dice and stepping down dice, I've seen the trays, like the character trays that are they're character sheets, but they're made out of wood, or often made out of wood. They're laser cut, where you're putting dice in different like wells in the tray. I'm sure people have already done this for Cortex, and they might have already tried to do something specifically for Tales of Xadia. I can see a really interesting like engraved wood panel or something that's in front of you that has all of your different distinctions and assets and attributes and all of that, and then actually there's a well for what die that is. You actually just pick up the die, and also rotate and or step up or step down dice by actually moving them. Tests, success or failure. In a test, the narrator assembles an opposition pool and rolls it, setting the difficulty by adding together two dice from the roll and announcing the total. Okay, so in this case, the tests, which are more like the passive opposition, you're still rolling dice for. So that's not a static target number like in Dungeons & Dragons. You're setting the difficulty by rolling dice. The difficulty is the number you need to beat for your own total when you roll your dice for the test. If you beat it, the test is a success. If you don't beat it, the test is a failure. Beating a difficulty means you roll higher than the difficulty total. It says higher, it doesn't say equal to, so higher than the difficulty total. If your total is the same as the difficulty's total, you didn't beat it, and so this still counts as a failure. The difficulty dice are usually two dice of the same number of sides based on the situation. Very easy, challenging, hard, and very hard. Okay, that's easy enough to remember. In addition to a difficulty dice, the narrator picks up one or more dice based on traits present in the location, narrator, characters who are in opposition, or anything else that might make things tricky. When in doubt, the narrator can simply add one more d6 to represent increasing risk, threat, or challenges, like it's rocky here and so it's hard to move around, or it's raining a lot so it's hard to see. See, that sounds a lot like aspects in Fate, but here, an aspect in Fate is just one thing, and it's, +2 or a reroll or something like that, and it's always those things. Here, you're able to get some type of degree of difference here, because it could be rocky ground. Well, is it rocky ground D4? Is it rocky ground D6? Is it rocky ground D12? So there's more options here, so you get greater granularity with those kinds of things, as I'm seeing here. Now, that does mean you have to keep track of two things. So not only do you have to say, okay, it's rocky ground, but it's a D6 rocky ground. But you could standardize these things. It recommends just a D6. So, D6 is your standard. Something is making it more difficult. Tests are usually uncomplicated. A success means your character does what they wanted to do, and failure means they don't. Occasionally, you might set the difficulty for an NC's test. In that case, you roll first, and the narrator rolls to beat the difficulty set by you. Usually, though, the narrator sets up scenes where you roll tests, as opposed to NCs trying to do things while you just sit and watch. Examples of tests include trying to climb something, craft something, use rune magic to affect a non-living target, search a room, or decipher a mysterious inscription on a wall. Example, Rayla's test. Rayla has been separated from her friends after a battle with the Delbarian bandits and hurries to catch up to them. She arrives at a mysterious ravine filled with howling winds. Her destination is on the other side, so her players declare she's going to try to scale the ravine wall and get above the winds. The narrator says this requires a difficulty test of 2d8. Rayla's player looks at her character journal and assembles her dice pool. Strength d8, because that's what covers physical effort. Devotion, because she's desperate to reunite with her friends and the ravine is in her way. Act first, think later, because of her impulsive nature. Her elven butterfly blades, which she's using to hook in hook configuration to help her climb. That's D8, D8, D8 plus D10, a pretty good dice pool. The narrator rolls the 2D8 difficulty, 4 and 6 for a total of 10. Rayla rolls all of her dice, gets 6, 3, and 2 on the D8s and a 6 on the D10 for a total of 12. If she needs it, she picks out one of the remaining D8s as her effect dice, but for this test, all the narrator needs is the total. So she climbed up. Okay. Contests, the struggle. Is this going to be a fight? For a contest, you're the one initiating it, so you pick up the dice and roll first, adding together 2 results for a total. If your opposition decides against opposing you after seeing what you rolled, you automatically win the contest. If your opposition decides to stop you, they assemble a dice pool and try to beat the difficulty you just set. If your opposition doesn't beat your difficulty, then you've won the contest and you get what you want. If they do beat your difficulty, it goes back over to you, as you can choose to give in which case you define the failure on your own terms, and you get a plot point. Otherwise, your opposition's total becomes the new difficulty. Okay, so they don't roll again, and you must roll again in order to beat it. Failing to beat your opposition means your opponent gets to define how they stopped you. Okay, so that would mean that if they rolled really well, that's why you might give in. Rather than trying to beat it, you rolled, you have some number, the other side rolled even higher than that, and that's why it goes back to you to say, do you give in, or do you try to roll even higher than that? Contests go back and forth until one side gives in or fails to beat the difficulty. The losing side takes stress, and the winning side gets what they wanted in the first place. Sometimes the narrator may initiate a contest when an NC chooses to do a thing. The narrator is essentially asking you, what are you going to do about it? However, the NPCs are the heroes of the story, so narrators shouldn't do this too often, or else the players are just watching the NPCs do things. Examples of contests include dueling across a battlement, putting your case before the king's court, struggling over a prize that your rival also wants. Okay. Do we go through this example contest? I think we'll just skip that for now. Okay, challenges. Overcoming extended obstacles. In a challenge, the narrator sets up a challenge pool based on how difficult the challenge is and how long it will take to overcome it. The former uses the same difficulty ratings as a test. The latter is several dice from 3 to 5, or sometimes more, whereas fewer dice means it won't take as long to overcome, and more dice means it takes concerted effort by multiple characters to do it quickly. Challenges take place over several rounds. Each round represents some passage of time. It could be a few seconds, or it could be minutes or hours. Fighting your way out of a waterlogged tunnel filled with rats might use rounds of only a few seconds each, but trying to transcribe a complex spell from a wall carving might take rounds of several hours to achieve. The narrator may declare that something happens after a certain number of rounds, such as guards arriving, a cave collapsing, or the sun going down. If this happens, the challenge will be a failure. If there's no such time-sensitive element to the challenge, then it becomes a matter of how long it takes you to overcome the challenge without getting stressed out. Other PCs might help take on the challenge, but everyone must take turns, 1 turn per player per round. The narrator decides which one of you goes first, but once a PC has had their turn, that player chooses who goes next out of the remaining PCs. Finally, the narrator gets a turn for the challenge pool, as if it were a character of its own. The narrator chooses a PC to test against, and the player sets the difficulty with their dice. Once the narrator has had their turn, it's back to the first PC and continues like it did the first round. Okay, in a challenge, the narrator rolls the challenge pool to set the difficulty, just like a test, okay? Then you roll your own dice pool and try to beat the difficulty. If you don't, you fail to progress the challenge, and you take stress equal to the narrator's effect dice. If you beat it, you make progress and compare your effect die to one of the dice in the challenge pool. If it's bigger, the challenge die is removed from the challenge pool. If it's equal to or smaller, the challenge die is stepped down by 1 step. Okay, so it's a way of degrading the challenge. Getting a heroic success in a challenge lets you overcome the challenge faster. Each heroic success lets you step up your effect die by 1 step, or keep an additional effect die from your remaining dice. If you choose the latter option, you can compare this added effect die to another die in the challenge pool. Once the challenge pool is reduced to 0 dice, the challenge is over and you've won. Examples of challenges include sneaking past dangerous guards, confronting a group of hungry beasts, overcoming a magical trap, dismantling an enchantment, laying siege to a fortified castle. So it's not, like, in one interpretation of that, I can see, well, that's fighting somebody, because you're, like, wearing down hit points or something. But this time it's your challenge pool. But it's not, because that was the contest. So we've got an example here of Rayla's challenge. I think I'm going to skip over that. I want to really get to stress and how exactly that works. But let's get down to outcomes. When a player wins a test or a challenge, when they get what they wanted, and they get to narrate the outcome. What this means usually depends on what they said they were trying to do. Okay. When a player fails, however, they should be entertaining in how they describe their failure. The only lasting effect is the story headed in a different direction than they wanted, unless they picked up stress or they rolled all hitches and came up with a total botch. Outcomes change the status quo. When your character fails, it doesn't necessarily mean the scene ends and their goals are thwarted permanently. A scene can have many tests and contests in it, including many characters, sometimes several tests or contests going on at the same time. Failure should always mean the situation has changed one way or another. Consequences should always come from failure, even if they're as simple as you dropped it, now what do you do? In some cases, losing a test or contest can result in your character being taken out of the scene, but in most cases, your character only needs to revisit their new circumstances and take a different course of action. Helping others. When a friendly PC makes a test or challenge, you can contribute to their success in several ways. When it's your turn, you can make a test. When it's not your turn, you can spend a plot point to give the other person a d6 asset. On the other player's turn, you can step down one of your value dice ratings by 1 in order to step up that same value in their dice pool for that roll. In a challenge, you can take your own turn against the challenge pool. Right. If you choose to step down a value, you don't recover the value until the end of the session. It's polite to ask if they need help, of course, and be sure to describe what this help looks like. Spirited encouragement, linking of hands, distracting the opposition, etc. If there's a contest interfering with others, if there's a contest underway in the same scene and you want to join in, bring it to a halt, you can attempt to interfere. Usually this means you want something neither of the other two characters wants, or maybe you want the same thing as one of them but on your own terms. To interfere, spend a plot point to jump in and roll your dice before the outcome is resolved, but only before the original contestants have had a chance to roll. But only after both original contestants have had a chance to roll. If you beat the highest roll of the other two characters, you bring the contest to immediate halt. Nobody wins. Nobody is stressed out yet. Using interference as a group contest. I'm going to pause right here for this video, but in the next we'll come back and take a look at taking stress and its impact on the game. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please check out the playlists on my YouTube channel. I've got a lot more on fantasy, RPG, storytelling, and more. Just pick a topic you're interested in, click the playlists, and enjoy some videos. See you next time.